Good morning, everyone. Welcome to another Innovise webinar on advanced hydrology. My name is Jonathan Clarick. I'm a mathematician and engine developer here at Innovise. Joining me is the beautiful Sophia Buchanan. Good morning, Sophia.
Hey, John. How you going?
I'm good, thanks. How are you?
Good, thanks. And hello to the 800 registrants that are joining us today.
Hoping you guys are in for an awesome webinar experience. So, just before we get started, I'll just start with a little bit of housekeeping. So, before we get started, just remember, you are free to ask questions anytime throughout the webinar. You can just use the question box on the GoToWebinar panel. If your friends weren't able to join today, the webinar will be recorded and posted on the website later in the week. And finally, if you're watching in a group, please send through the names and details of those joining us so we can all get you a certificate for your CFD.
CPD.
CPD. Sorry, I'm so used to saying CFD. We'll all be handing out a password at the end of the presentation, so please have a pen and paper ready. So remember, at Innovise, we do have a no questions unanswered policy. So please take the time and the opportunity to use that question box for any questions you may have had lingering in the back of your head for the last few years.
So guys, if you've been a little bit confused about the name Innovise and where XP Solutions has gone, you're not alone. It was quite confusing for us as well. But really, back last year, Innovise and XP Solutions merged. So Innovise were a water solutions software company just like XP, except they focus more on the sewer and water supply, in Australia anyway. So XP now with the Stormwater, we're kind of the complete package. So if you look on our website, we've got more than 80 products, which is very confusing. So what I've done is I've kind of limited down what would be useful for the Stormwater group. So XP Rafts, which is the one we all know and love, it's been around for over 40 years. That's our hydrologic tool, and that's unchanged except for the new features that are coming for the AR&R 2016. Then we've got our XP Storm and XP Swim, which we've got a lot of users around Australia, and that's got the Rafts hydrology already embedded. And it's a 1D, 2D coupled model, and it's really got some great design functionality. So even after the merger, we've got a whole lot of new products. That design functionality of XP Storm and XP Swim really is next to none. Now with the merger, we now have access to another branch of suite of software, which is InfoWorks ICM. So InfoWorks ICM is actually a 1D, 2D GPU coupled model, and it's got all the infrastructure that you would want for if you're working in large teams. So it's got multi-user decision tracking, it's got an asset management platform, and it's got a build and solve environment. So you can have one person building a model, and then you can have a bank of simulation machines, which is really good for crunching through that new AR&R ensembles. And you'll see at the bottom there, we've had the 1D, 2D FB GPU solver since 2006. So, you know, that word GPU's kind of come to light in the last year or so because we've got some new products from other companies coming out, but we've had that since 2006. So with this merger, it's really great for myself and John and the rest of the team because we've got access to now a much larger team, developers, we can all share knowledge. But it's also really great for you guys because you've now got access to a whole lot of different software from under the one umbrella. So if you were thinking that one of your software that you're currently using isn't quite right for you and maybe you were looking elsewhere, you would usually have to go to another company and purchase that software. And the money that you'd spent in the software previously would go to waste. We don't want that here at Innovise. So if you've got software at the moment and you're thinking about changing platforms or you think something might be more suitable for what you're doing, you know, all of these products are pros and cons for the kind of projects you've got. If you think there's something more suitable for what you're doing, we do have some upgrade options for you to keep that kind of flexible. All right, so let's move on to the actual webinar.
So this time last year, we ran a very similar webinar on advanced hydrology for AR&R 2016, and we took a poll of our users, and we asked them, so how ready are you for AR&R 2016? Well, years gone by, you know, we've got some new tools out there to use AR&R 2016. We'd like to ask the same question again. How ready are you for AR&R 2016? How are you using it? So
back a year ago, there really wasn't many people using it, and a lot of people still hadn't read it. So let's see if anything's changed. So I'll just give you a couple of minutes there to put down your cup of tea and select a choice there. And let's have a look at the results. So it looks like about 50% of you are now using part of it, which is a really good outcome, and it's leaps and bounds of where we were last year when only about 13% were using it. It's really great to hear, and really good that Rafts is about to come out to help you with that information.
Absolutely.
So you've all logged in today to hear about advanced hydrology. For anyone that's a little bit curious about the kind of basics, the Hydrology 101, we have run webinars in the past on these topics. So you can actually go onto our website or our YouTube channel and you can have a look at those webinars. They cover things like the water cycle, just the rainfall data in general, temporal patterns and kind of losses and the different routing methods. Today we're really going to focus on the advanced things, which are the spatially varying rainfall, the aerial reduction factors, pre-burst, xprafts hydrology and a bit of the background around that. Then John's going to give you a nice demo on xprafts, and we're going to have a look at what we actually do after we've built and run that Rafts model. So let's take a look at spatially varying rainfall. If we have a look across Australia and we take the 1% AEP and the 1 hour duration, the intensity frequency data for Bundaberg is 112 millimetres an hour. Now, we all know that across Australia, it's not going to be the same. If we take a look at Alice Springs, it's 72. And if we take a look at the other parts of Australia, Perth and Hobart, it's even less. So we all know that the intensities change around Australia. Are we ever going to build a xprafts model of the whole of Australia? Probably not. But once we get into these smaller catchments, we tend to forget about this. So if, for example, we take a model of the Bundaberg region, this is the Burnett River. Around that river, we've got 340 kilometres of river, or 430 kilometres of river, sorry. The IFDs are going to be changing in that catchment. So we really want to take account of that when we're doing these models. Applying a single IFD for that entire catchment would not give us the right answers. And if we zoom in even further, which is the outlet here at Bundaberg, we might think, okay, it's a small area, the results are going to be the same. You might be surprised to find just 6 kilometres down, we've got a change in IFD. This is based on the fact that the Bureau of Meteorology have a 2.5 kilometre grid for their IFDs. So if you've got catchments around that 2.5 square kilometres, you might find that your IFDs are changing in those very small areas. As a rule of thumb, ARNR 2016 recommends anything greater than 20 square kilometres, we should be considering spatial variations. Anything smaller than that, we're really just applying an average.
Alrighty, now aerial reduction factors. Now, what are these things? Now, what these are essentially are just a multiplier factor that you apply to your expected amount of rainfall when you have larger catchments in order to slightly change the expected amount of rainfall from a given storm. Now, if we think about this, what we're actually simulating. So suppose we have a very small catchment, right?
Take the red rectangle on the screen there, John.
Exactly. So if you have a very small catchment, you can safely assume that your entire catchment is covered by the one storm.
Yeah.
Right? So, but what happens if we start scaling up? If we start getting to a bigger catchment, well, all of a sudden, you start getting a fair bit of variability over the scale of your catchment for a given amount for a given storm, right? Because storms aren't uniform and continuous, right?
Yeah, in a perfect world, we'd have a nice cloud that gave us equal rain, but that doesn't quite work that way.
Only works in maths and physics, unfortunately. not quite in the real world or engineering. So what we need to do is we apply these area reduction factors. And if we scale up even bigger again, we can see that, well, now not even all of your catchment is being covered by the rainfall. So what we do is we adjust our IFD values by these multipliers to effectively take this variability into account.
So if we wanted to model this kind of variability, John, we actually do have software that we can do that. So we can actually download the information from the BOM, which is the radar information, and we can apply that directly to the model, which means that we're actually replicating that information across our hydrology and our hydraulics. But that's not commonly done, especially for our small catchments where we're doing urban developments. That is when we need to apply these area reduction factors.
Yeah, absolutely so. Now, for those people who are all the Back to the Future fans out there, we need to think about this both spatially and temporally as well. So you've got to start thinking a bit fourth dimensionally, guys. So what you do is we take both the size of our catchment and the duration of the storm into account. So the longer the duration of the storm, the more of your catchment will probably be captured, will actually capture some of that rainfall. But for the short duration storms and the smaller catchments, that's when you adjust how you apply these factors. And that's what this table in ARNR actually does.
Yeah, so you can see from this table, anything greater than 1 square kilometre actually has an ARF applied to it other than 1. So if you're dealing with catchments less than 1, you really don't need to think about these calculations. Anything greater than that, you might want to start applying these factors. Now, just remember with the area reduction factors, it's the catchment to the outlet or the area of interest. So even if you've got a very large catchment, if you're worried or concerned about something at the top of the catchment where the contributing catchment area is less than 1 square kilometre, you don't need to apply these things. Something to keep in mind.
Right, and so the second more advanced feature we'd like to discuss today is something called pre-burst rainfall. Now, when we're doing design, we traditionally always use burst patterns for modelling our design storms.
That's right.
That's right. So what we typically would do in the past, though, however, is just set our losses to 0.
Yeah, so we just assumed that the rainfall had already occurred before the burst and that it had filled up all our infiltration storage.
Right, but with ARNR 2016, we've got a renewed focus on using real data to do our modelling. So what we're doing, and what ARNR provides, is they provide an estimate of roughly how much rain actually fell before the burst actually occurred. And we can actually use this data to actually go, all right, how is this going to affect our losses? What part of those losses are actually going to be filled up before we actually get to the main burst? Or will it be saturated losses or will it only be part losses?
Yes, that's a really good point, John. It really does affect those initial losses. And we can see there in the diagram that the initial losses actually eat into the burst, but sometimes we might be in the other situation where the initial loss is actually taken in the pre-burst. So we actually have rainfall before the burst in the model.
All right, so how do we apply this in our software? So, well, here's just an example, right? So as you can see, we've got different AEPs at the top and then different durations of storms. So as you can see down the bottom, you actually have quite a significant amount of rainfall for some of your storms.
Yeah, so I should note this image is actually from Townsville where they've got quite high pre-bursts. If you're in areas like Perth and Melbourne, you might actually find that those pre-bursts are so small that they'll be eaten up by the initial loss. But when we do go into areas where we've got these high infiltration, these high pre-burst depths, we really need to think about how we apply them in the model.
Yep, and so this is how we would go about applying that. So what we want to do is we want to take the amount of pre-burst rainfall and put that before the main burst of the storm is going to hit. So as we're adding complexity, we need to kind of think of that a little bit how we do this though. So what we could do is we could take the entire amount of the pre-burst rainfall and dump it in a single time step into our model. However, as you can see from the second image there, that creates quite a large spike of rain right before our burst. And it's actually a higher amount of rain than the rest of the intensity of the storm. Not very realistic. So what we can do though is we can actually smear that out over a larger number of time steps. right? Kind of just flatten it out a little bit and give it more this realistic approach that, all right, we've got this small amount of pre-burst that kind of chips away at those losses, and then the main burst hits.
Yeah, so this is really an interim measure, isn't it, John? Because we do expect the pre-burst patterns will be coming in the future.
Yeah, that's it. So it's just an interim pattern, as I said, just to give it a kind of a model of what's going on until the R&R committee decides to release this information, give us what do pre-burst patterns actually look like compared to just this flat temporal pattern.
So if anyone's already used the XP Storm, XP Swim storm generator, you would have noticed that pre-burst conditions button. All you need to do is tick that on and then decide how many burst steps you want to spread or smear your pre-burst through. So we're recommending something there that will actually replicate what would happen in the real world. So, you know, one time step is not appropriate when you've got a large pre-burst step. All right, so they're kind of the advanced parameters that we need to think about when we're doing hydrologic models. Now let's talk about Australia's favourite model, xprafts. So xprafts was actually developed in 1974 by Alan Goyne, who was working at Willing Partners, and Tony Atkins, that was working for SMEC. The reason it was developed was there's a major development being undertaken in Darwin that required a study of complex drainage systems associated with it. So remember, this is back 40 years ago when we didn't have all these advanced programs. After thorough research into the various hydrologic routing methods that were available, they really discovered that nothing could sufficiently represent Australia's conditions and data. So a new program was born to specifically suit Australian conditions. And this model was called the Regional Stormwater Model. Unfortunately, in 1974, Cyclone Tracy hit Darwin. And with that, the development plus the program development went down the drain. But Alan Goyne continued to develop the program. And in the mid-70s, he started using it on catchments within the ACT and central New South Wales. And in 1978, the model was sold for the very first time, and XP software was born. Alan continued to work on the program to completely change it and improve it so that he could model urban catchments. So in the 80s, the model was renamed to Runoff Analysis and Flow Training Simulations, better known as Rafts, to reflect the major changes that he'd done so that we could better calibrate urban catchments. So in the 80s, it was just Alan Goyne and the two contractors that he had sold the software to. Now in 2018, we have a whole lot of users across Australia, Vietnam and Malaysia using xprafts. It really is Australia's favourite hydrology package. So what sets xprafts apart?
Well, one of the main features of xprafts compared to other Lawrenson's method software solutions, Lawrenson's method being the underlying routing method of xprafts, is actually it takes any particular catchment and subdivides the area under the hood up to into 10 equal sub-areas, right? What this does is actually help smooth out some of the mathematics that goes into the solution scheme and actually gives you much better results even for a single catchment solutions. Yeah,
so Alan Goyne was quite smart with this. Eric Lawrenson's PhD over this said that you needed these 10 sub-catchments to be able to rely on your results. So instead of building 10 sub-catchments and routing it through those catchments and only being able to rely on the results at the downstream end, he embedded them into each sub-catchment, which means to us that we can use the results from a single node and a single catchment, which is really important in urban developments.
Absolutely.
The other major thing that sets xprafts apart is this splitting of the catchments. So we split our catchments into an impervious and pervious. So John, I get a lot of questions about why we do this.
Right, so one of the main reasons for this is that we've had a lot of research over the years to actually go, what is the best way to do this? Should we model catchments as a single catchment that is partially impervious, or should we split them up into two separate catchments, part with 100% pervious and 100% impervious? And we found that the research shows that we actually get much better calibration if we split them up. And well, it's actually interesting, the answers you actually get are actually quite different. So the main reason for this is because Rafts is a non-linear routing method, right? So similar to if you take the square of the sum of two numbers, it's actually not equal to the sum of the squares of those numbers. It's because it's a non-linear system.
That makes sense to even me, John.
So now on to some sexy maths, guys. So S equals B cubed of n plus 1. Now, that probably sounds like Chinese to most people, but it's actually the underlying equation that Lawrence's method uses.
Now, John, I'm going to interrupt you there. I know you're itching to tell everyone about the mathematics behind xprafts, but we really just want to know how to do it in the software.
All right, Soph.
So what we're going to do is we're going to jump to xprafts and we're going to have a look at a demonstration. All right, so
here's our happy little model.
Yeah, so this is a model provided by Bundaberg City Council. Thanks, guys. We've got about 19 sub-catchments here, about 17 square kilometres altogether, all coming down into an outlet down the bottom. And it's made up of sub-catchments and these lag links. And what we're going to do is, when I received this model, it was built for ARNR 87, and we're going to just convert that to ARNR 2016.
Absolutely. It's actually, the process we've designed is actually quite simple to do that. So let's have a look at how one would go about that. So we know that the catchment's all in one big network already, which is good because Rafts is different to swim, that it requires one large dendritic network rather than a series of dendritic networks. So that's already ready to go. So how do we actually convert this? Well, let's have a look. We start by going to configuration, job control, and then look at the ARNR 2016/global storms list. Now, currently we've only got a single storm in there. It's kind of boring. So let's put some new and exciting storms in. So we click on our button to import ARNR 2016 storm generated storms. And it just appears somewhere else. Alrighty. So let's have a look. What we're going to do is we're going to create a new instance of our ARNR storm generator. Go to ARNR data to import and download our data. And here we start with a map of Australia. So we know that we're in Bundaberg, so let's start zooming in. Alrighty, so let's just pick a random location near Bundaberg. We need to tick on and confirm the conditions that we can download the IFD data from the Bureau of Meteorology, and we can download our data.
So John, I noticed that you haven't included the very frequent and rare IFDs. This is really just for the water quality modelling on the very frequent and for the rare greater than 100 year or 1% AEP, isn't it? Yeah,
so the very rare storms, the more extreme storms, they go from 1 in 200 years up to 1 in 2000, but they're only valid storms for greater than 24 hours. So if you're doing large or extreme event modelling, that's probably the place for that. And then, as you said, the water quality stuff where you have AEPs greater than 63, so 1 EY storms, that's when you can have those models there. Today we're not quite interested in that, we're just looking at a pretty simplified model. So we've downloaded those, they're all ready to go. All right, so let's now, we said before, because we've got a decent sized catchment, we do need to consider area reduction factors.
Yeah, so it's greater than that 1 square kilometre, and we're really interested in the flows at the outlet of this model.
Yep, so let's have a look. So we said our total catchment area was 17 square kilometres. And we just tick on our used area reduction factor depth modification, and there's our coefficients for our large equations.
So John, on that one, if we were modelling something greater than 75 square kilometres, we would then need to go and use the area reduction factor patterns as well. Luckily, this model isn't that big, so we can stick with the standard temporal patterns here.
Yeah, thanks for that, Soph. So now our reduction factor ticked on. We also said we want to start considering the pre-burst rainfall conditions. So we tick on that one. Now again, we don't want a single time step because that will just lump all of our pre-burst into a single time step. So what we want to do is we'll smear that out over, say, 6 time steps. Just give a bit of that pre-burst type feel for our storm compared to the actual main burst of our storms. Now we don't want to run every single storm and every single duration.
We could, but we would bore you while we're running it, so we won't do that.
So today we're just going to run the 1% and we're just going to run a select few durations. So say the 1 year, the 1 hour, 3 hour, 6 hour, and 9 hour, just to keep things short and simple. And we go OK, and then we can replace our current storms with these ARNR 2016 storms. Import complete, always reassuring. So let's go back into our storms list, and as you can see, we've imported all of our ARNR 2016 storms into our global storms list. Now we want to run them all, so let's just tick on all storms. And now let's see if we can solve it. Alrighty, that seems to be solving away nicely.
So John, this is something I've noticed that's quite different from the last version of Rafts, isn't it? You've done a lot of work here. Yeah,
we spent a lot of time under the hood in Rafts, trying to get the engine a little bit quicker. We've still got a bit more work to go, and because it's an ongoing research project to try and make our Rafts, all our engines as fast as possible. But we have achieved a fairly significant speed up for XP Rafts already, so that's always promising.
And we really need that with those ensembles, don't we?
Absolutely. As the number of storms keeps going up and up, as required by ARNR, we need to keep performing faster and faster calculations. So that's why we continue to put research time and development into building faster engines.
Yeah. And what we're going to do today is John's building this Rafts model. We're going to take a look at those results, and then we're going to take that into a hydraulic model. So this is something we're seeing a lot of people do this around Australia for the ARNR 2016 stuff, is they're building either a hydrology model like Rafts, or they're building a simple hydrology and 1D hydraulic model to kind of narrow down the amount of runs they need to do in a hydraulic 2D model.
So feel free to take this opportunity, guys, to ask us any questions if you have anything you may feel like you want to ask us, chance to ask Sophia or myself, anything that you may have thought up over since the last hydrology webinar. As I said, we have a no unanswered questions policy here at Innovise, so feel free to ask anything, and if we can't get back to you right away, we will get back to you in the next couple of days. So, all right, that's been done. Let's have a look at the outlet and just to see what storms we've run. And as you can see, looking very nice. Right, now that's a lot of data there to analyze, Soph. So even for me, I probably can't pick out the exact which one's the highest median storm or highest mean storm. So let's instead turn to our ensemble statistics utility. So to look at the ensemble statistics, we go to results, ensemble statistics utility. And here we can see we have a list, all of the different ensembles we've ran in our model. So we want to choose our outlet node, which is 1.07. And we can see that the 6-hour ensemble was the critical duration.
Yeah, so if you look across there, John, with the mean answer, which was 209 QMEX, we can see which storm actually gave us that value, which is the 6-hour storm 7.
Yep, so let's have a quick look in the box and whisker plot just to make sure that this is reasonable. Yep, as we can see, we get that nice duration curve. Oops, it's on the wrong screen. There we go, so we get that nice duration curve, we get a peak, so our 6-hour storm is going to be our critical duration. And as I said, storm 7 is going to be our critical pattern. So let's see what storm number that is. So if we go back into our list, 1%, 6-hour, storm 7, storm number 27 was our critical duration. And that's going to be important when we run this through our hydraulics model later on.
Yeah, so Rafts is a little bit different when it looks at the results, isn't it, John? It looks at the actual number of storms in the list of global storms.
Yep. And then it exports that to our lock and top files, which people may remember from other types of hydraulic modeling done in the past. and we can actually bring that data straight into our hydraulics model.
Yeah, so now that we've run the hydrology model, we've got our results. We know that we're looking at about a 6-hour duration. John, what would happen if I added an extra catchment and it pushed us over that 17 square kilometre limit, that 20 square kilometre limit that we needed spatial varying for?
Right. Well, that's easy to change as well, So let's go back in and have a look at our job control. And we've noticed before, so we go configuration, job control. Now we have an ANR 2016 spatially varying storms list.
This really excites me, John.
It should, it should. So if we click that option, we get again a similar list to the global storms list we had before. But now we have a location tab as well. So what we can do is actually we can import multiple locations from our ANR storm generator. So let's do that, just that. We click the import local storm generator from ANR 2016, and we get a slightly different window, which is now the local ANR storm files, which is edit one we've made before. And as you can see, we actually can have multiple locations, each with its own properties for ANR 2016 data. So,
John, how do we relate that location back to the nodes in our model?
Right. Well, what we can do is we can close this down, go back to our model, and on each of these nodes now, you'll be able to click on, if I click on a node on the link, we go to our subcatchment data, and either subcatchment will have this location information at each of the subcatchments. Right,
that's awesome. So we could have a different storm generator file for every single subcatchment if we wanted to.
Yep, if you have a large enough model and you're just modeling single catchments far enough apart, you could pull down IFD information from every single pattern for every single catchment, or you can copy and paste information around either using the copy feature, which is in the top right-hand corner of most dialogues, or using XP tables and be able to rapidly change what locations are applied to what catchments.
That's really great. I think that's one of the first times that we've seen this in a software.
Absolutely. Definitely, I've seen one of the first and probably one of the simplest implementations I've seen at least.
Great work, John. So, all right, we won't run the spatial stuff at the moment. We'll just look at how we can export the results into our hydraulic package. So, John, we already know that we've got the lock and tock files exported as part of the run. The other thing that I'm going to need in my model are the nodes, because that's where the flows are going to be distributed to the hydraulics package. So in xprafts, can we export the nodes?
We sure can. So we can export all those locations using our export feature. So if we close out of all of these windows, we can go to File, Export Data, and then we just export all of the nodes, and that will be able to export all the information you need to bring in to a hydraulics package. So here, and we'll just export Bundaberg.xpx, and creates an XPX list of all of our node and catchment information.
Yeah, so that'll have our node name, our X coordinate, and our Y coordinate moment.
That's it.
So make sure when you're building your Rafts models, if you want to do this, you need to build it in the right location.
Absolutely.
Thanks, John. We'll now jump to our hydraulics package, which we're actually going to use InfoWorks ICM. So if you're an XP Storm or an XP Swim user, you might use xprafts as well, especially now that we've got that spatially varying option, or you can use the xprafts routing method that's embedded in the program. InfoWorks ICM, though, it's really built for these kind of large flood models. So we can see here I've got a background aerial, the same as the xprafts model with the background catchments in there. Those catchments are just polygons, they're not actually doing anything in the model yet. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my network, import, and I'm going to open my data import center. The first thing I want to import are those node locations. So they will be a 2D point source, and they will be from a CSV file. So that XPX, we're just going to rename that as a CSV, and we can open that one up, Bundaberg nodes, and we can do the drop down. We've got the node, the X coordinate, and the Y coordinate. The last thing I want to do is ICM is really built for these kind of team environments. So it's got a lot of things to help you track the decisions and the things that you're doing. So I'm just going to import from the flags. Sorry, not import from flags, use the default flag, and I'm going to use XP. That means everything that I'm importing right now is going to have a flag that has come from an XP model so that I can track that later on. I'm going to hit import there, and it's imported 22 nodes. So if I come in here, I can see my nodes have been imported. And I don't really like that view, so I'm going to use a preset color scheme because I like pink, and change that. So just dragging that on there. The next thing I want to do is I want to import the storm. So if I right click, import and inflow, I'm going to go from InfoWorks format CSV. So before I do that, I actually need to convert the Rafts lock and top files, okay? So if you've ever opened up a lock and top file from XP Rafts, it's dumped all the result files with all the nodes in the one file. It's quite hard to view. So we've developed a little tool to convert it to ICM. So I've got here a list of user-defined tools. So in ICM, you can make as many tools as you want, and you can add them in the toolbar. So I'm just going to click that one there, and that's run the process. So now I can go to my import flow, and if I go to my file, so these are all files created from that executable. And you can see they're all the storms from the XP Rafts model. So, John, if we think back to when you were looking at the storm number, I think it was storm 27.
Lucky 27.
So that was the one that proved critical at the outlet. So I'm going to go storm 27, hit open, and you can see there I actually already had one in there, so it's created a second one. And if I open that one up, I've got my time and all my nodes plus the flows. The last thing I need to do, so I've got my nodes, I've got my flows, I now need to give it a hydraulic model to run on. So I've got a ground model here. I've just used the Elvis online tool to grab some Lidar, and you can see there I've got the ground model underneath. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to put a 2D mesh on. So ICM is actually a mesh, not a grid. So instead of drawing around here, which would take a little while, I'm going to import one that I prepared earlier back to the import center. And I'm just going to import a 2D zone from a shapefile. And the only thing there I need to set is the ID. Okay, so with those flags again, I can pull that from the XP model and I can import that. Now, if I just remove my ground for a minute, you can see that green boundary now. So that's going to be the 2D model. And if I double click on that, I get the options for this mesh. So you can see there we've got the 17 square kilometers. It's going to ask me for the maximum and the minimum triangle size or element size. So I want this to run relatively quickly. So I'm going to go a maximum of 200 and a minimum of 50. The next option I have is the boundary points. So you can see here, this is actually outletting, I think it comes to the ocean. So you could actually put a tailwater level on there, but for simplicity, I'm just going to let the water straight out of the system. So if I put here a dry boundary condition, that's just going to let water flow out of the catchment once it hits there. This is a little bit different to XP Swim and XP Storm. When you draw that boundary, it actually assumes a glass wall. You do have this terrain sensitive meshing. So if you turn that one on, it's actually going to look at the Lidar underneath and create your mesh to bend around it. So we can turn that one on. and I'm not going to apply direct rainfall at the moment. So we're going to use those Rafts hydrographs. So I've built that one. I'm going to go to model and meshing and mesh my zone. And you can see I'm just using my ground model there. And you can see down in the dialog here, it's triangulating at the moment. So the bigger the mesh that you've got, the longer this will take. And again, the more powerful the machine you've got, the quicker it'll go. So you can see there, my laptop's not too bad. I can load that one in. And if I zoom in here, and I turn on my mesh elements, you can see there the triangles kind of running around that pond there. All right, so I've got my hydrographs, I've got my node points, and I've got my 2D model. Simple. Now we just need to run it. So I've got a run here already set up. So double click on that one. We might want to, so you can see here this little red exclamation mark on the model. That means that I've set it up, but I haven't actually done the engineering checks on it to make sure that it's going to run. So if I hit the tick button here, which is the validate option, and hit OK, that's going to check everything in my model is set, ready to run. Okay, so things like pipes, if you've got pipes in there and the invert levels are poking out of the ground, something's not right there, it'll pick that up before you hit run. So that looks all good there. I'm going to commit the change. And I'm going to leave a comment here so that if anyone picks up this model later on, they're going to know what I've done. So I'm going to import from xprafts, and that's saved the model there. So back to my run. I'm going to update to the latest. So I'm going to run the latest version, which is version 10. And I'm going to put my inflow in. So that will be my inflow from xprafts. And the last thing I want to do is check that it's going to run long enough. So that run, John, was 6 hours. So really for a hydraulics model, you want to run that longer than the peak. So we can run the 6 hours and check if it's going to meet the peak. I'm going to have a guess and we'll go at 7 hours. And then last thing, I just want to check that I'm going to use the GPU card, because there's nothing worse than running the model longer than it actually needs to. All right, we should be good to go. I'm going to hit run. And right at the moment, I've just got my laptop hooked up to the screen. So I've just got my computer to run on. If you've got a bank of computers, I would then have the option of running on, say, John's machine.
Nice. So you've been hoarding machines from Bitcoin mining or something, for example, and you've got 17 spare computers lying around. You can link them all together and actually be able to smash out all those ensembles, for example.
That's funny you say that. I only had someone on the phone the other day say that he was going to actually take his computers off Bitcoin mining to do this.
Perfect.
So good example. So hit OK. And you can see down in here, the model is pre-processing. So it's getting all the data together. And once it starts simulating, we should see that. So you can see there it's simulating. And we've got another nice view here. You can actually see the water there, how many wet cells you've got. You can see the time step. So this is a really critical one. You know, with GPU finite volume models, they do tend to just drop the time step rather than becoming unstable. So rather than, you know, sitting there making sure that your model's not going unstable, it's just taking the time step down. You do not want this, because what happens is, yes, you get a result in the end. One, it's possibly gone, well, should have gone unstable, but two, it's probably taken 10 times longer to run than you wanted. So if that time step started going down to 0.001 second or something like that, I would be a little bit concerned. I would stop and look for what could be causing that instability.
Yeah, that's right. So a tiny time step is indicative of potentially problems in your model. So similar to how going on stable previously, if you, for the XP swim modelers, would use instability as maybe there's something wrong with my model. In finite volume modeling, it's more to do with if the time step's really small, again, you may have something wrong with your model.
Yep. Another thing you can see here, John, is the 2D inflow and outflow. That's another good way to check if your model's going to run long enough. So I ran it for that 7 hours. What I could have done is run it for 12, and then if I saw that the results were actually gone past the peak, what I could do is I could actually stop the model there and review the results. So we'll just give that a few moments to finish solving. And that's done. So we just click on the ended results there. And if I drag my nice results, hopefully we should have some water in the model. So we can see there the water's being discharged from the nodes and is coming through the model. So we've got some fuzzy velocity arrows. We can change all of this, so I'll just turn those arrows off for a moment so we can just have a look at the depth. And there we can see we've got a pretty nice 2D flood map. What we'd want to do, John, is we'd want to go back and make sure that the Rafts model actually matched the flows in the 2D model. So what we want to do is we want to check the flows at the outlet. So you can see here, these are 2 outlets in Rafts, and they combine down here. So what I can do is draw a new line. Always left to right looking downstream, and always perpendicular to flow. And what I can do there, I've just drawn my result line. This is after the model has run. I'm just going to grab my results from there. Oh, I've drawn the wrong line. I've got depth there. So you can see the depth. I actually want a flow line. So draw another one there. And we've got the flow through the line. So we actually haven't hit the peak, John. So I'd actually want to go back and run this 2D model a little bit longer. But you can see there it's actually starting to get up close to where the Rafts model was giving us.
Right.
Now, one thing that's really good about bringing the model into the hydraulics is the chances of the hydraulic model and the hydrology model matching is pretty unlikely unless you've done a really good job of those lag links in Rafts. So lag links in Rafts, it's generally people calculating those times outside the software and putting them back in. A hydraulic model, so a 2D model, is actually a really good way of getting those times right. So we can go back and forth to make sure that the models are calibrated to each other.
Yeah. It's also important to remember that lag links, for example, they're just conceptual tools, right? All it does is it translates a hydrograph from one location to another with a set lag. In the hydraulics models, you actually got this actual proper routing through your 2D model.
That's right. One last thing we can do is under the windows, we've actually got, this is my favorite feature. We've got a 3D model. Bundaberg, it's quite flat, as you can see. But one thing you notice when you bring it into the 3D is this location here. So you can see water's actually ponding up behind the road, and we don't have any way for the water to get underneath like it would in the real world. So really good way to locate what's going wrong, and we want to go back into that model and add a culvert. I would hope that there's a culvert there in the real world.
One would hope.
Yeah. So that's really it, guys. That's the model demonstration. That's kind of the workflow that we commonly see. And they're all the new features in Rafts. So if we go back to our presentation. If you like what you've seen with the Rafts today, you can go to this link and you can download a version for yourself. You will need Rafts, so our info kit, to be able to use that license. But if you've got a 2016 license now with Rafts, you should be able to use that.
Yep, that's right, Soph. And I believe, please go out there, download it, have a play, use it on some projects, and give us your feedback. Because we're here to try and make the software as great and as easy for you guys to use as possible. And I can only do that if you let us know what you like, what you don't like, where can we improve.
Otherwise, we'll catch you next time. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you very much, guys.
And have a good day.
See you next time.